we normally do true crime on a Tuesday.
Yes.
However, we missed that, and you said, no. We're going to march on here. So very, very sad disappearance. Samantha Murphy, a mother of 3, ran a small business with her husband, Michael, running in the hope of completing a marathon. That's what she was building up for. Now, 51-year-old Samantha Murphy disappeared 4th of February, so just over 12 months ago. She'd regularly run in local bushland. That was sort of her go. But one morning did not return from a morning run in Ballarat. There has been CCTV footage captured of her leaving her house around 7 a.m. She was due at a family event at 11 a.m, did not show, and family contacted police, and it goes from there to which we get to March, and there's an arrest of a kid called Patrick Stevenson. Now, Patrick Stevenson, Brian, name originally was suppressed from the media. It's since come out, but a person who's been well and truly across this whole story, and that is the lovely Olivia Jenkins from the Herald Sun, a crime reporter. Olivia, thanks for joining the Run Home with Joel and Fletch.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Olivia, can I just ask you this? So it's been almost, over 12 months now. What happens are the police still gathering evidence, and the man they got in custody, are we allowed to name?
Yeah, let's ask Olivia.
The gentleman they've got, the young kid, Patrick Stevenson, what are they doing with this now? Why hasn't he faced court yet?
Well, we're still in the middle of a pretty lengthy process, but as you said, it was nearly a year ago that Patrick was arrested, and that was about just over a month after Samantha went missing, and he's been in custody that entire time. And we're in the process now of awaiting a date where he will face a committal. He's pleaded not guilty to her murder. There is no date set as yet, but it could be a fair while before we see him back in court, and he will stay in custody until then as well.
So, Olivia, he's pleaded not guilty. Have we got a clue as to why they have pinned it on him, why is he being charged?
Police have remained pretty tight-lipped about what has led them to his arrest, especially because we don't know about their connection to one another. We both know that they are from the greater Ballarat area, and there are some loose sort of community and connections with their kids as they came through school. But that's about all we know at this stage. And so all we know right now is that there have been a number of intelligence based off phone data and maps data that have led them to do searches in particular spots across various parks and bushland in Ballarat, including some mine shafts as well. So we've been led to these areas when police have done searches and found items belonging to her, such as her phone and her wallet. It was encased in a phone cover which had details identifying that as being Ms. Murphy's phone. And that's what's led them to closing in on this individual. What that exact data is at this stage, we're not sure. We do know that police in court several months ago did ask for an extended period of time to sift through the sheer amount of data that they did have to comb through, because you've then looking at issues of access, getting into someone's phone, their personal information and their data, working with telcos as well. It's not a cheap exercise and it can take a long time. So we know that they do have a lot of information that they have to sort out that would have originally led them to this point.
Yeah, so this is the timeline, Brian. So 4th of February, Samantha went missing, and Olivia was talking about how much time it takes. So 29th of May, her wallet and phone were found on the bank of a dam of a property 4 kilometres south of Buninyong, where the mobile phone towers picked up the signal.
And has the man, this Patrick Stevenson, has he been helpful to police at all?
As far as we know, he has remained completely silent to police. He hasn't been forthcoming with investigators at all. And I think a big part of that is people and investigators want to uncover the whereabouts of Ms. Murphy's body, and police do believe that he can help with that, but he has not said anything as far as we know.
Because he was charged, I'm just reading here, he was charged with murder the next day. So the police obviously have got something on him.
Yes.
And I know you're saying that they're being quite tight-lipped, but you would imagine the next day, they must have some pretty damning evidence. Why would it take this long to go to a committal?
Well, there's a number of factors that can come into play there. A lot of it can be logistics with the different courts. This happened in a regional area of Victoria as well. And as we know, it happened in Ballarat. So it's a big, small town. It's relatively tight knit. You've got to factor in, can you find an objective jury there? Can a courtroom accommodate the dates for all of the parties to come together to go through each stage of the court process? And we know that when he was arrested as well, there was an extra day following his charge where his name was suppressed for a brief period. So things can come up all the time where that can push that court process back. And it also depends on whether or not someone pleads guilty. And in this case, Patrick has pleaded not guilty, and he has agreed to have his trial fast-tracked to the Supreme Court in Melbourne, which does change the process again. So he's agreed to, come to Melbourne to have that heard, and whether that changes the jury pool or the eligibility of people to hear that case, that's another thing that can change the timeline of a court process as well.
Olivia, I know this must be hard for how much you can actually answer, because when these big cases happen, loose theories do get kicked around. Are there any sort of theories or even things that we can probably assume, like was he a runner? Would he run out in the same area? Was there any hint of a possible relationship? Like, is there anything that we can share as far as a loose theory is concerned?
Well, as you mentioned, this case has just sparked so much interest, not only from the Ballarat community, but everywhere else as well, and including internationally. And it's something that where people, when we did find out that Patrick was arrested and he was the one that was going to be charged, we were all trying to find out what their connections were to one another, being that they were from the same town as well. We're not too sure whether they did have any personal connections. It seems really unlikely that they knew one another and ran in the same circles, or, as you mentioned, ran in the same area as well. But we do know that they are both from the Ballarat area. So any connections in terms of them physically being geographically near each other as well is the really central part to this case, and is also what led investigators to search the various dams and areas of bushland that they believe they were both in at the time that she disappeared.
So did the police just find the wallet and the phone together, or are they in different places?
From what we can tell, it was a phone wallet that was encased in a wallet that can have several credit cards sort of, stashed, and you can fold the case over. So it was found all muddied and waterlogged in a dam. I believe it was near Durham Lead, which was, as you mentioned, in late May. And that you could see had some, what looked like to be credit cards and ID cards that were also attached to the phone, albeit they were covered in mud, but they were still all in one piece.
Hey, Olivia, I'm sure, and we'll wrap it up in a moment. We appreciate your time. A year, just beyond a year of the terrible anniversary of the missing Samantha Murphy. But can I ask you this, and I'm sure we can answer this. Are we aware of the alleged? Does he have a criminal history?
He does, and obviously we have to be very careful about what we can say there. But what we can talk about is the fact that he did plead guilty last month to some drink driving charges, which I want to make very clear are completely separate to the matter that we're talking about today. And that's been through its own process and will be resolved. And that was over an incident in late 2023 when he was riding a motorbike under the influence, and I believe came off the bike. So he does have a criminal history. Aside from that, we're not aware of anything else. And the charges now that we're talking about are very different to that offending from nearly 2 years ago.
And Olivia, sorry, I know you mentioned earlier, and we're close to a committal. Is there a date set yet?
Not that we know of yet. We don't know when he will be back in court, but we know that he hasn't applied for bail, so there won't be a hearing to determine whether he is to be released until he does face trial. But we don't have a set date for a committal, and obviously not for a trial yet.
Dear, oh dear. What else is happening in the world of the Herald Sun, Olivia?
It's been a very busy week down in Melbourne. I'm not too sure how much your listeners know about our underworld here, but we have had a string of quite significant murders down here in a relatively short period of time. A big deal for us was the murder of Sam the Punisher, Abdul Rahim, who had a number of hits on his life, up to half a dozen before he was gunned down as he left a hotel in Preston just a little under 2 weeks ago. And so we're waiting to see if that will spark any retaliation. He had very strong links to the tobacco trade, which has exploded here in the past year or so. So that's another really big concern for us. But we are to see whether that will have any sort of ripple effects in that trade.
Is he aligned to any outlaw motorcycle gangs? Do we know?
He's had a number of affiliations over the years. His history is very interesting. He was a member of the Mongols and he was booted out of there nearly 3 years ago, or just on 3 years ago now, because he was apparently causing too many problems within the club. And then from there, he did go on to, he's always been a fighter, but he did further develop his career as a professional boxer. And then he became further aligned and ingrained in our illegal tobacco trade with one of the major families who runs a huge syndicate out of that here.
Because every time you turn the TV on, or towards the end of last year, there's always a firebombing of a tobacconist. Are they firebombing them? Is the motive because they're not selling their cheap cigarettes in that certain tobacconist? Is that why the feuds are on?
Yeah, there's a few moving parts to it. You've obviously got warring sort of factions who want control of that trade, and you've got people who either don't agree to sell one side's preferred products, or they're selling the wrong sides already. And so those firebombings often come after several warnings that come in person.
Wow.
We've obtained footage of that where people have gone into shops and said, I'm aligned with so-and-so, you're going to pay this much and you're going to follow these instructions. And if not, here's what's going to happen. And obviously, as we now know, what happens is if they don't follow, the shop gets firebombed. And we've seen that time and time again. We're up to more than 130 shop fires here in Victoria alone.
Olivia, I don't know if you could answer this.
130.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Can I ask you this? If you were dabbling in that area, illegal tobacco, is the crime or the punishment as high as if you're dealing in cocaine or heroin?
I couldn't say for sure, but what we do know is that it's a lot more lucrative for organised crime figures to attempt to smuggle in larger quantities of tobacco because it's lower risk and it's cheaper. Whereas if you tried to import a shipping container, for example, containing meth or cocaine, the quantities of that to be trafficking a commercial amount are much lower, and it's such higher risk for higher reward. It's extremely expensive. It's a lot more expensive than attempting to do it with tobacco. And we know that the bust that we see and the excise reclaimed is all intelligence led, which does unfortunately mean that for every one that Border Force and federal and state police do pick up, there's a whole lot more that unfortunately is still getting through.
Yeah, because I was wondering why they're getting into the tobacco. Obviously,
130 have been bombed.
Do we know how much? What's a bodgy pack of smokes?
How scary would that be?
What's a bodgy pack of smokes cost you, Olivia? Do we know?
It can range from anywhere between, depending on where you're buying it, anywhere from $15 to $30, which is still way less than half price of what you would pay for something that's regulated and that has been approved for import. And the number of shops as well, let alone the ones that have been firebombs, the ones that are opening have just exploded across Melbourne as well. If you look at how many we had, even 2-3 years ago compared to now, it's just ballooned.
Wow, Olivia Jenkins, starring debut, Brian.
Yes, very good.
True Crime Thursday. We normally do a Tuesday, but Olivia, thank you for the update, particularly around Samantha Murphy, that very, very sad case, which is ongoing at the moment. You can catch Olivia's work at the Herald Sun. Olivia Jenkins, thanks for being part of the Run Home with Joel and Fletch.
Thanks so much for having me.
What, you're still here? Well, you can see more on the Joel and Fletch socials and catch us live on SEN Radio, you beautiful humans.